President Nixon. Do you remember the bills you have to pay, or even yesterday?
Again, do you remember President Nixon? The themes of the music are front and center at a time when he's putting an immense amount of pressure on this tension between what the dream is and how it's actually come to fruition in reality. What up, everybody? My name is Fred, and I'm a singer-songwriter based out of New York City. I perform music on the streets to people I've never met before. So I'm supremely interested in live performance, what makes a good live performance, and especially diving back into the history of performances to see if we can glean from excellent performers of yesteryear. So with that, today I'm extremely excited to highlight a performer that we haven't talked about yet on this channel, and that artist is David Bowie, Ziggy Stardust himself. Supremely popular and successful recording artist, one of the best-selling musical artists of all time, and left an indelible mark on popular music from the 1960s when he began in England, on then to when he sort of translated that success into a United States audience, and then further on as he got more experimental into different types of art forms and ways of expression beyond just recorded sound. Today, we're taking a look at him at the Dick Cavett Show in 1974. This is a backing band that's really cool. We talk about people like David Sanborn, a young Luther Vandross on the vocals, among others. And I actually have not watched this video in its entirety to this point, so I'm looking forward to diving in just as much as you are. Sparkle.
Puts her down behind the fridge, who lays her down. She runs to my life's only thing. Am I still too young? He takes her hand and bear. She takes his ring, takes his babies, takes his minutes, takes her nowhere. Heaven knows she'd have taken anything, 'cause all night she wants a young American. Young American, young American, she wants a young American. So all night she wants a young American. Right through the picture window she spies the slinking vagabond. He curses as he passes a Ford Mustang. Heaven knows she'd take anything, but the beacon is tied up for nothing. Saying nothing, he cuts his hand. Showing nothing, it goes like a song. She cries, where have all my heroes gone? All night she wants a young American. Young American, young American, she wants a young American. So all night she wants a young American. All the way from Washington, breadwinner stays at the bathroom floor. Live for justice 20 years, do we have to die for the 50 more? All night it wants a young American. Young American, young American, what's young American? So all night it wants a young American. Do you remember President Nixon? Do you remember the bills you have to pay, or even yesterday? Have you been the young Americans? Just you and your idol singing both sets of leather everywhere. I'm not a top left in the ghetto. Well, would you carry your razor just in case of depression? Sit on your hands in the bus of survivors, rushing along the Afro Sheila. got to be there. In the room where that was on the door. In the room the hand could say no more. In the room that man with that judge. In the room behind that man before that. It's a crowd that just does make sense. Ain't the one damn song that can make me break down and cry. What the young America, all night. I want the young America. I want what you want. You want what I want. I want to what I want to what I want to I want. Young America, young America. I want the young America. The young America.
Hey, shake that booty. Sweet, what an incredible video. So much to talk about. We're gonna go, sort of section by section and point out some of the aspects of the performance. But also, I really like kicking these off by setting a little bit of a contextual basis for, when we look at something in 1974. There, of course, we're going to see parallels right off the bat to our day and age, nowadays, contemporary times. But I think it's really great to take a look at the history that is active at that particular time as a lens to understand the music and vice versa, because some of Bowie's decisions from a performance standpoint make a little bit more sense once we contextualize in that regard. So right off the bat, we've looked at concert performances as concert films. Stop Making Sense. The Stones' 81 American tour. This is a television performance, televised to a live audience and going across the airwaves to Americans in 1974. A couple of thoughts there. It's impossible to overstate the importance of television as a medium that connected the entire nation at that point, and as a means to make or break artists based on performances exactly like this. We talk about the Ed Sullivan Show as the ways that the Beatles broke onto the scene in the early 60s. Well, that was still in the early days of television. And it's funny we mentioned President Nixon. One of the big data points of television's influence in the United States was talked about as Kennedy's and Nixon's televised debate. And so when we contrast, when we think of the television as a way that people can present themselves in an even more compelling manner to capture a popular audience, really quickly just framing it in that regard, we can see ties directly to social media, to TikTok, to digital medias of this day and age. But from the standpoint of this period of time, we're almost halfway between that onset at the start of the 60s of that technology, and then the more fuller development of music television as an art form and a way to showcase videos that we saw in the 80s with MTV, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that that's a really grounding place to look at how Bowie is presenting himself and the character. And that as a sort of midpoint between the 60s and the 80s, because a lot of times that's how people look at the 70s as well. That was a little bit the snooze fest before things really started to pick up again at the 80s. You can argue that point of view, but that's just one way to look at it. In that regard, how he presents himself, and let's try to find a particularly strong, this is great. So when we talk about the fashion style of the 80s, a decade later, in many ways, Bowie is foreshadowing that in really incredible ways. I mean, look at his brightly colored, almost neon colored hair, the epaulettes, the big shoulders on the suit jacket. It's still tweedy, grounded 70s style coming out of that 60s hippie stuff, but he's starting to present himself as an exaggeration of popular sentiment, popular culture, popular lifestyle, that then when we look at somebody like David Byrne in the 80s, Byrne is fully exaggerated. And some of the hand movements, some of the gestures that Bowie makes in this video are very easily tied to the gestures that Byrne makes in Stop Making Sense. And that as a lineage is cool, but it also stands to the point that both of those are trying to make, those artists are trying to make with their music. Burn, more so in '84, a decade later, again, the tensions that are starting to be uncovered with this Young Americans song and during this time period are in full force in the '80s. People are fully questioning themselves, fully committed to the TV age. That is the evolution of what we see in the mid-'70s here, when questions of authenticity, questions of, is the American dream really playing out the way that we want it to, and in a fair way and an equal way for everybody, those are really coming into question after a decent amount of prosperity in the '50s, certainly, and then on to the '60s, playing into the social revolution. Well, now the revolution's sort of petered out. Where does that leave us in the '70s? Well, economic stagnation, inflation, questions of trust in our administration as a result of the Watergate scandal, and, sort of a hangover from the Vietnam War that nobody really knows how to process. The parallels between that time and our time now are stark in that regard. But it becomes interesting that the degree to which Bowie is foreshadowing some of those cultural trends that continue to play on into the '80s, and beyond. Another key theme of his performance here is, and of Bowie's artistic persona in general, is reinvention, the theatricality of it, and inhabiting a character as a means to perform. And this is done very discreetly in Bowie's case, as he outlines specific periods: the Ziggy Stardust period, the Thin White Duke period, and on into when he gets into more ambient and other styles of music. He's very clear about the different stages of performance and character play, and really, in a way that calls to Daniel Day-Lewis as a character actor, as a method actor, did his best to inhabit these characters to the fullest extent and their exaggerations, sometimes to problematic effects, as with some of the controversy he generated during the Thin White Duke period of time. In that sense, he's being very intentional about how all the different decisions, even including from the music standpoint, from a compositional standpoint, play towards this broader theme that he's trying to convey during each of these eras in time. Two artists that come to mind in that regard: Prince, for one, and then Taylor Swift with her Eras period, and her ability to commercialize these different versions of herself and to map the progression over the course of her career, and then commercialize that journey as something that people can connect to as a whole. Bowie's a huge model for how an artist can do that while staying tied to some underlying theme, defining characteristic of their character. So that's all really interesting from that point of view. A quick note, the Brian Eno connection, after we get into the late '70s, after sort of this period of Bowie's, of this plastic soul period, which we'll get into in just a sec, he does end up going on to work with Brian Eno, who, as we noted, works with U2, works with the Talking Heads, is known as an ambient composer of his own right. Somebody who sort of in the background, maybe we talk about somebody like Rick Rubin, who now in the modern day was responsible for everybody from the Beastie Boys to the Red Hot Chili Peppers to involvement with Jay-Z, et cetera, but more as a background figure, and is only now starting to be viewed as a creative genius in his own right. Brian Eno very much had popular success on his own, of course, but played a role in the popular success of some really, really influential musicians, and is very notable for that regard. Young Americans in the mid-'70s, the particular phase, the particular identity that Bowie was taking on was that of, and it more is visible from the music as the progression from Ziggy Stardust to the Thin White Duke, is a type of music that he calls plastic soul. And when we talk about the British invasion, we talk about the Rolling Stones, and the Who and the Kinks and them, and Led Zeppelin especially, pulling from Black American blues music from the first half of the 1900s, falling in love with that and presenting their own version of it, but without really calling into question the authenticity of white, UK-based artists, basically copying in some cases one for one the riffs and the song structures, etc., of these Black American musicians. The question of authenticity aside, that's a larger discussion. By the time we get to the mid-70s, those tensions are brought a little bit more to the fold. And when Bowie is crafting something that he calls plastic soul, he's playing on the rubber soul of the Beatles, of that album. But in essence, what he's saying is he's taking this tradition, this soul R&B blues tradition, and he's adding this little plastic sheen to it that's making it more palatable for a commercial audience. And there's a really great quote that he has. He says that plastic soul is the squashed remains of ethnic music. So he understands that there is a packaging and a commercialization of these styles of music that is then making it possible for his, creating a platform for his commercial success. And I think overall the theme to be paying attention to as we dive back into this performance is those R&B soul influences, how he is mediating them through this theatrical character performance, and then how he's portraying these visions of prosperity and American dream and possibility that a decade ago, and especially 2 decades ago, were defining factors of American society, that now the tensions where those really haven't come to bear in the way that everybody hoped are becoming huge inspirations for culture and music. I mean, again, the 70s for me is one of the strongest decades of music. I'll hold it up against any other decade. But really that sort of decline of that post-war era boom, as it translates into the superficiality of the 80s and beyond, we're seeing in 1974 those tensions really coming to a head, and Bowie is leaning on them specifically as a way to craft a character and as a way to speak to an experience of the popular masses that allows him to his art to reach a degree of commercial success. So, with all that background out of the way, let's just dive into the video one more time and see if there are pieces that we can pick out specifically. This is going to do a lot more to do with the, some of the performance aspects and how it's presented, and a little bit more of the, the nitty-gritty of how he's playing the music, etc. Nice. So, off the bat here, really great setup from a visual framing of the television shot. Of course, for a TV show, they're going to be really practiced about this. But it's really classic to be able to show the performer up here. And if we think rule of thirds, you'll see he's pretty much square on that left third. And then the balance of, a larger group of backup singers is giving contrast and balance to that. So there's a clear visual hierarchy here. And then, the band further off in the back to the left. But what this does really well, and especially as we get to the chorus, this ties back to something that we talked about, especially in the Talking Heads video, of the idea of call and response as something that ties all the way back to the musical traditions of enslaved Africans as they were brought to the United States at first, but became a core aspect of, gospel traditions, certainly, but also R&B and soul, in a way that on the track, on recorded music, the experience between singer and audience member, performer and audience, is blurred in using the background singers as a stand-in, basically, for that audience that the lead singer would be calling and responding with. So, from the standpoint of setting this all up visually, we're prepared for that to happen based off of how the hierarchy of this shot has been set up.
Puts her down behind the fridge, who lays her down. She frowns to my life's one thing. Am I still too young? He takes her hand and there, she takes his ring. takes his babies, takes him minutes, takes him nowhere. Heaven knows he'll take another thing, 'cause all night you once a young American.
Yeah, exactly. Look at, and Bowie as a professional, he's setting that up visually too. Look at, he's opened his body to, he knows which camera is live, he knows which camera is on him, or at least he has an understanding of the different cameras and knows that he can rotate between them and really should, in the same way that you would deal with the entire audience. He's dealing with all the different cameras that are there for him. But he's now opened his body and is actively engaging with the backup singers in the chorus of a really famous chorus. This performance actually happened before the song, about 4 months before the song was released. But he's basically bringing that chorus into the performance with him, and just by the framing of his body, creating this possibility for interaction, 3D interaction on the 2D television screen. Let's jump forward a little bit. I want to get especially into some of the gestures that he gets into, because again, even in a television setting, just the same as David Byrne on stage in Stop Making Sense, certainly, and then Mick Jagger in Every Context Ever, has created a version of their character where they can supremely exaggerate how they behave, how they carry their body for the benefit of the audience. That's also something that we're seeing Bowie do in his own way here. Again, do you remember President Nixon? The themes of the music are front and center at a time when he's putting an immense amount of pressure on this tension between what the dream is and how it's actually come to fruition in reality.
Ain't that close to love? Ain't that close to love? Ain't no Barbie doll. My heart's been broken just like you, yeah. All night you want the young America. Young America, yes, young America. You want the young America. So all night you want the young America. You ain't a bear, you ain't a hustler. It's got a cat, baby's got a crash. Black's got a sweat, white's got his soul tape. Brown's got clamps, look at my hands shake.
Look at my hands shake. Beatles callback.
You got the beat. Say no more. And the retired that with that judge. And the retired that before that. It took out that just without faces. Ain't the one damn song that can make me break down and cry.
Basic performance, technique, performance theory to make sure that he's signaling in a big way to the band what he wants to have happen. In this case, a break. Everybody cut out, it's time for my moment. Something just to be thinking about at a high level, making sure everybody's on the same page with the band. Of course, everybody here is a professional, and they would have rehearsed quite a bit. That is more showmanship for the audience in this context than it would be, specifically to make the band know that that's when to stop. But if you're hiring band members, if you are putting together a show with intermingling pieces, the roadmap happens before the show, but the roadmap also happens during the show. And how you can turn that command of the band, 1, 2, 3, 4, classic way of doing that as well. How do you turn the functional requirements of that it takes to put on a good performance into something that adds to that performance and conveys the emotional content that you're hoping to convey? So that's it. That's Bowie. this was a pleasure to watch, a pleasure to talk about. I mean, he's such an amazing character, amazing performer, and is, again, you know, extremely influential for both his music and the way that he was able to invent and reinvent himself in relation to what was going on in society and culture at the time. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, put a comment below if there's something, you know, that stood out, if there's something I missed, if there's something you want to talk about further. That's one of my favorite parts of this whole thing, is getting to hear the further stories about these artists that people contribute. And let me know if there's any videos that you want me to do from here. Yeah, and with that, that's it. Thank you very much. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.
Oh, I don't want the young American.